This is a video of me welding a 1.34 millimeter steel with an acetylene torch and demonstrating tack welds first that are annealed and unannealed, and comparing how easy they break. I will now perform a tack weld on both these pieces of metal side by side. Okay, the welds are tacked. I will be annealing the left, this longer one will be annealed, and this weld will not be annealed. Now, if you look at the welds, the heat line from the weld is right here and right here. Okay, that's the heat line from the weld, and the heat line from the weld is here. The welding process makes the metal red hot, and what it does is it hardens the metal. The annealing process will soften the metal. Now, it has to cool a bit before you anneal it. It doesn't have to completely cool down. Now, I'm going to anneal the taller piece of metal by applying the heat to the center of the weld and waiting till the center of the weld turns red hot, and I'm going to watch those heat lines move out from the original weld line. Okay, there, that weld was annealed. It turned slightly red hot. I'll anneal the other tack weld. Now, if you make the weld too hot, that one there, like I did there, let it cool down and re-anneal. It should only turn a dull red, and the heat line should extend a little bit past where the weld is. It's about here, and it's gone out a little further. So I'm going to let that cool again and re-anneal it. This is very thin metal, so it has to be done carefully. Okay, there. That was better. The metal just turned slight dull red. See the heat line that came across here, and the heat line's up here. So this one is annealed, and this one is not. Now I'm going to take a crescent wrench and apply backward force to this weld here, and see how far I have to bend it to break the welds, the tack welds. Okay, that tack weld failed with just a few twists. About 3 twists. Now this is the annealed one. Starting to fail, but It's taken a lot more twists. It's still holding. I think it's broken on one side and it broke on this other side. So you can see that it took a lot more twists to break the weld. Now I am going to re-weld these two welds so they're solid. And they'll be a lot stronger. They'll be a lot stronger than the tack weld. Okay. The welds will be placed right across the metal. Okay, the welds are finished. I am going to take a wire brush to the welds to shine the metal up and remove the heat lines so you can see the heat lines appear when I anneal it. Okay, now I'm ready to anneal the weld on this piece of metal here. Okay, I want a softer flame to anneal the metal because I do not need the heat that I needed to melt the two metals together. So I'm going to start annealing by moving the torch back and forth across the weld until I see the heat line start to appear. I see the heat line coming up on the top, on the bottom. That's the annealing process. And I want to get the weld a dull red. I do not want to bring it to a bright red. It'll be hard for you to see that the weld's dull red, but you can tell the amount of heat by the heat lines. Okay. The heat line is out here. The heat line from this weld was only around the weld. Now this process is the annealing process. This process is no annealing. Now I'm going to let the welds cool a bit, and I'm going to test the welds and see how many times I have to bend it back and forth to break this metal. This is very thin metal. It's less than a 1/16 of an inch thick in imperial, 1.4 millimeters. Very thin plate. A doll skeleton would probably be thicker than this, I would guess. So this metal should break easily compared to a doll skeleton metal. Okay, so I'm going to bend it at about 30 degrees back and forth and see what I have to do to break this metal. Just wait. To break it, I have to grab it lower to the weld to demonstrate. I need a bigger wrench because the metal's flexing. I want to put a lot of stress on this weld, so I'm going to use a bigger wrench. Okay, now still not going down far enough. I need to grab it near the weld. The weld is starting to break on this side. And has completely failed right across the weld. You can see part of the weld here and part of the weld there. So the weld broke in half. Now, this one here, I can't get enough force on it, so I'm going to bend this halfway here so I can get more force on it to bend this weld. Okay, that way I can get down a little further. Okay. Now the weld is broken, but it's not the weld that broke down the center. If you look very carefully, it broke more on the weld here. And here, the metal broke beside the weld. The weld itself did not fail. It's the metal beside the weld. Whereas on this one here, the weld sort of cracked down the middle more. Annealing softens the metal so it'll flex more. And if the process is used, it'll improve the strength of your welds. Both on the tack weld and on the full weld across, the annealed weld held better and didn't break. The weld would have been stronger if it was welded from the back also. I only welded it from one side, so when you bend it back and forth, both welds are going to fail easily because they have a fracture along the back. When I welded saw blades, I welded it from both sides, and the weld was very strong. We also hammered the welds, took all the air out of it. We'd heat them up red hot, and we forged the weld, and it made it even stronger. That's not possible if you're using a MIG welder on welding a sextol frame. But the importance of annealing, when we welded saw teeth on, when you annealed the weld, it made the metal more flexible. This is very thin plate, and that's why it broke just under the weld. I flexed it back and forth and it cracked here. Here it broke more along the weld. The weld wasn't as strong as on this side. See, this is more in the weld, and this is more outside the weld. This is completely flat here. This has still got weld on it here. So it broke more along the center of the weld. Okay, that's the benefits of annealing. If we didn't anneal our teeth on properly, when the saw went down and it was cutting, the teeth would tear off. If it was done properly, the weld was welded properly from both sides, forged, all the air taken out of the welds, and then annealed. That is the only way the teeth stayed on. If the welding process was flawed, a bad weld annealed will not stay on. If you got a good weld and it's not annealed, it won't stay on. So everything has to be done right. The welding process has to be good, and a weld should be annealed. Okay, I had re-welded my first TPE sextol with this method, and the back broke, and the metal was a little thicker than this, and it broke. It was about the tube was a little bigger than my thumb, and I welded it to the tube on the frame. So I was welding to something like this. I welded it all the way around. I annealed it. It has held for a year. The doll failed after its second use. So I can send you a video of the weld if I want to get my doll out. I got it stored in a box right now, and show you the repair on it. But I got a year out of my weld, and the factory didn't get 2 uses out of their weld. This is the end of my video.